Hello, my friends, and welcome to another session here at Power Platform Learner to Leader. My name is Bülent Altensoy, and I'm your host today. And we have an awesome guest here with us, which I want to introduce you in a couple of seconds. So, first of all, again, our schedule, what we have achieved so far in February. So, we had awesome presenters so far, and we're not stopping with that. We're also continuing with another awesome presenter today. He's an MVP, he's based in Canada, and it's very early for him, but we are really delighted that he's waking up that early for us and presenting for us. His topic is Get Started with Adaptive Cards for Microsoft Teams using Dataverse and Powdermate. It's a very exciting topic. I'm really delighted to introduce you, Norm Young, in a couple of seconds. So before we start with this, once again, Microsoft Learn and the Microsoft Learn community, we're here for you. So the Microsoft Learn community is a collection of experiences and offering learners with a variety of ways to connect, engage with other learners and technical experts to increase your expertise. And this is one of the sessions which just helps you, to get better and to increase your experience and knowledge in that. And you can find us everywhere here, especially at eckert.ms.microsoft Learn Community as well. But we have also this link here in that case, which I'm just showing you as well. There it is, where you can also join our Power Platform Learner to Leader with eckert.ms/join PPLTL as well. And we are really happy. We have a huge community in our learning room with over 2,300 learners there. And we have also a growing learning community at LinkedIn as well. So we are currently around the 800, and we're happy to see that the number is growing. We're really, really delighted to see you there as well. Now, before we start with Norm and I let him in, first of all, our code of conduct. What is very important for us is that we all be aware of others, we respect others, we are friendly and we are patient, we are welcoming everyone, we are open to all questions because I tend to say there are no stupid questions, only stupid answers. So in that case, be encouraged to ask a lot of questions which just comes to your mind because you're here and we want to learn. And be understanding that we all are different and have different backgrounds, and this is just our nature. And be kind and conservative. So I was just a little bit fast, or my mouse was too fast. So in that case, I let now in Norm, and I'm happy that Norm you're here with us today. So welcome.
Thank you so much. And it's great to be with a number of fellow Microsoft learners. And that's a really big component about community. It's a great thing that ties us all together. We're all very passionate about learning how to use those Microsoft tools that we're passionate about together, learning from each other, lifting each other up. So it's a fantastic opportunity to be here. Thank you for taking time to come learn about getting started with adaptive cards in Microsoft Teams using Dataverse and Power Automate. It is a subject matter that I use at my work and I use it in the community. And I think that you'll find some value in it. And the value that you're going to find is that you're going to be able to take these disparate systems that you have in your organizations where you want to start gluing them together with some lightweight automations using the data and tools that you have. And adaptive cards are going to be an opportunity to do just that. My name's Norman Young. I'm from Canada. I'm near Niagara Falls. To give you a reference point, I'm about 10 minutes from Niagara Falls, and I'm about an hour and a half outside of Toronto. I'm not in Canada today. I'm in a very cold Chicago, Illinois, where I'm doing a work trip. So I'm in a hotel room. It's not the best Wi-Fi. So if my connection drops out, I'll apologize in advance. I'm a Microsoft MVP. I've been an MVP for 5 years. I started in the Microsoft 365 space, and now I'm in the business application space. And I've got both of those awards, not because I've found that in reality, you don't just focus or work on one area, whether it's M365 or if it is Power Platform. They work together. And that's one of the reasons why I have those dual awards, is to try to reflect that. I'm a solution architect at AvePoint. When it comes to tech, please talk to me about Power Platform governance. I'm a big fan of Dataverse and model-driven apps, and lists and SharePoints are things grew up with, and Power Automate. So let's talk about adaptive cards. Like, what are they? Uh, they're they say they're cross-platform and that they can be delivered on anything like Microsoft Outlook, Microsoft Teams. They can show up inside of a web chat. We can use them in all these other types of frameworks that exist. It is a very small card or a user interface that contains small snippets of information. We can do things like including actions. We can open a record inside of Dataverse or Microsoft Lists. We can take input from a user and we can run actions with it. It's authored in JSON, and that can be a barrier for a lot of us, including me. But it's not just limited to developers, and I'll show you some of the tools that are available to us to author these cards without having to have that developer background. So a lot of the use cases that you'll find for adaptive cards will be around task management, where you can send a planner task to a user and ask them to view the information or provide updates and have that information reflected back in a Teams channel. You see a lot of approval use cases where they'll send this card to the user in the place that they're working, whether that's email or Teams, and it helps to streamline that document approval process or that other type of approval process with more contextual information than you get with the out-of-the-box experience. User input. So let's say you're trying to run a survey or you're trying to gather information on a process. This is a great way, again, of not having a fully built system or application that you force the user to work to. You just reach out to the user and ask for that information. So here's a real world example of where we use adaptive cards, excuse me, at my own work. We're a software company, but we do have a services division in our org. And whenever we're doing a services engagement, we have to submit a budget sheet for approval. It sits inside of a SharePoint document set, inside of a document library, and it's called a services budget sheet. And so what we'll do is, for this selected file, we'll execute this budget sheet approval workflow. And it will send an adaptive card to the user that submitted it to let them know that they've started the request process. This in turn will be sent over to an approvals team, and it gives them all of the information that they need to make an informed decision, including a number of buttons that send you over to either the sheet itself to view it, the CRM opportunity, the document set that it's contained in, a place to put in feedback to the user, approve, reject, cancel, that type of stuff. And when it's done, it sends back another card to the user who requested the approval that it was approved and they're able to move on. So we have SharePoint, like many of us do, where we're storing documents. We have a CRM sitting in another system, and we need to connect the two. And we use Power Automate, Dataverse, SharePoint, and the adaptive card and a workflow to tie them all together to make that process come to life. The last screen in the example is that there's like a transaction, a confirmation that the work has been approved, and we have a history where we can view all of the approvals and rejections. So I mentioned earlier that adaptive cards reside or are built in JSON, and you can see an example of the JSON code and how complicated it can be. In this example, it's a very simple image that's being reflected. So we have a structure, and it's called the adaptive card structure, and it's the root object that describes the card itself. It has the elements, the actions, the schema version that's required on the platform that renders it. It has a body, and inside of the body are all of the different building blocks for the elements that we'll do. Some of those elements can be like a text box, an image, a button, things like that. And then finally, we have actions. Those are the buttons that we saw in the previous example screen. The actions, we can open a URL, we could submit an action, we can do other things, limited things that we can do inside of the card that will be captured by something like Power Automate, and then we can run with it to do other things. So again, I mentioned JSON. It is an obstacle. It's a technical barrier for people to to take on, especially if you're more of a maker like I am. So what we're seeing on the screen right now is something called the Adaptive Cards Designer. And you can find that at adaptivecards.io/designer. This is a free website that you can use, very similar to an authoring canvas that you might find in Power Apps. And what it allows you to do is to build out your card, drag and drop different elements on and configure them and build it out in the safe environment. And then you can copy the payload over into something like Power Automate, connect your dynamic data, and then start moving through. So let me talk about a few important things on here. Number one, if you had to start from scratch, it can be hard. So one of the great things that they do is they give you all of these samples that you could start with. So new card, and then you have these examples to select from, and I'll show that in our demo. The next part is that you have a host app. And so this is where the adaptive part of Adaptive Cards comes in. You can pick how it's going to be rendered, what platform. So it could be Outlook, it could be Viva Connections. In this case, we'll use Teams. You have a schema version. The schema version is tied to the host app that you choose. So if we use Teams, it'll have a certain schema that is currently supported. If you go to Outlook, it might have a different schema version. So you have to always understand the host app and the maximum or minimum required target version of the schema. You have cards, a number 4, and elements. So you'll notice on the left-hand navigation, it says card elements. We have things like containers for creating a rectangle where you're going to put information into. We have things like fact sets, which are just bulleted bits of information, column sets, just like it sounds. We can add things like text box, images, action sets, and then we have inputs, whether that is pressing a button, typing in information, stuff like that. Each of the elements that we might add, like a image, for example, or a text block, will have properties that you can do, like setting the placeholder text, a URL to an image, things like that. And then finally, we have the card payload editor. This is number 6. This is where the JSON is dynamically created for you. And when your card is completed, it's something that you have to copy out. They call it a payload. You copy the payload out and you move it into something like Power Automate to wire up that dynamic data. And at that point, you can run automation from it. Okay, that was quick talk about the things that we'll see, but I think it's, at least in my case, I'm a visual learner, so I like to see things firsthand. So let's just get into demos, and what we're going to build are 2 adaptive cards. The first one is simply going to reach into Dataverse, find something that's got a due date, and then we'll send out a reminder card. And then when we're done building that one, what we're going to do is repurpose that card to allow for input. So let's come out of out of PowerPoint, and let's go into Office 365, and let's set the stage here. I have a model-driven app sitting in Dataverse. And inside of it, I have a service application, and I have service requests. And inside of the service requests, I have data about the request, but more importantly, I have a due date. And what I want to do is offer up a solution where I can send the reminder to the user 7 days out. So to do that, I'm going to build a flow that will allow us to get that data that is due in 7 days, put it inside of our card, and then send it to the user. So to do that, I'm in my solution inside of Power Apps, and I'm going to create a new flow. Okay. I would like to create a new flow, but I'm not getting any screen feedback. Bear with me. I think it's just okay, I'm not sure why. Let's give this one more second here. Sorry, folks. I think my session has just crashed. So I'm back. Can someone give me a thumbs up that you can hear me? I'm not sure what happened, but it looks like our session was disconnected. So let me start over again. Sorry about that, folks. I think we'll probably just blame hotel Wi-Fi for that. So when I was talking last, I was saying we were going to build a demo card that will do a reminder. We have a model-driven app, and we have data around a service request. Let's take a quick look at that record. And what the adaptive card will do is pull all of this information about this reminder based on, build an adaptive card around the service request based on the due date. So to do that, I'm going to go into my solution. I'm going to create a new flow. And this is going to be a scheduled flow. It's going to run daily. So run every day for my trigger. And so every day it's going to scan looking for the data. And I'm going to pull the data from Dataverse. And I'm going to list the rows. And I'm going to do this from my service request table. So I'm just going to save this. When you build a flow inside of Dataverse, you get this classic authoring experience, which I'm no longer used to. So what I want to do is just save the flow, and then we're going to back out of it. And we're going to edit this in a new tab. And the new tab will open it up in the native Power Automate experience. And it's a much easier way to build up our flow at this point. Okay. So I'm going to pause on the flow for 1 second. And now I want to build an adaptive card. So I'm going to go to the adaptivecards.io designer. We were talking about this earlier. And we have the ability to pick a new card. We can do it from blank, or we can use these really good examples or samples that they include. So in this case, I think I'm going to choose this one, and I'm going to repurpose it to suit my needs. First thing I need to do is determine what is my host app. Well, it's going to be in Microsoft Teams. So I'll set it to Microsoft Teams. And you see, these are all the different options you have. Outlook actionable messages, Viva Connections, Cortana Skills, Bot Framework, Search, Widgets, Boards, and so on. So let's pick Teams. And you'll notice that it changes. And you can go light or dark theme, depending on how you expect it to be rendered. You can emulate a device. It could be a mobile device, or it can be a desktop. And then we have the different schema versions. And you'll notice that for Teams, I have to use 1.5. Right. All of the JSON is listed below, and you can see it's pretty substantial. And it's not something that I would want to write. So it is a canvas. It has a drag and drop experience. So what I'll want to do is start building it out in a way that makes sense for me. So let's do some of that now. So I'm going to drag a new text block onto the screen. I highlight it, and that you see in the card structure that it's been added as a new text block. And we can update the properties. In this case, I want to say this is our service requests reminder. And now I have different elements that I can change. So what I want to do here is make the weight of the font bolder so it's more obvious, and I want to change the color. And so the colors, they're not like RGB colors. That you don't put in a hex code. You can say, is it good? And it'll turn green. Is it bad or it needs attention? It can be red. In this case, I just wanted to highlight it, so it's going to be this purplish color. And now I'm going to repurpose this molten vine text to read the account name. So you notice I put an @ symbol. It means nothing technically, but it's going to be a placeholder that I use inside of the JSON when it's in Power Automate to replace. I don't like this image, so I'll get rid of this one. I don't like this column here. I'll get rid of that. And so anything else that I don't want will go away, or I'll reuse. In this case, I'm going to repurpose this one, and this is going to say, what is the current status of the service request? And again, and I'll use that @ symbol as my placeholder, and I need to replace this with the status value inside of the flow. I want this to have a bold weight. I want the color to be accented so people can see it. And then other things I might do is I might change the spacing on this next text box to be separated. And I'm going to replace this with more dynamic data. And this time it will be the description from the record. I don't need this text box. I'll get rid of this one. And what I want to do is have something called a fact set. The fact set comes down, and it's like bulleted bits of information. So what I want to do is provide that small snippet of information for my user. So I'm going to call this the product name. And then I'll have a value that I need to put there. So it'll be the product name. And the next one I want to do is the due date. That's just the point of all of this, and the @due date. So all of these placeholders, I'm going to have to replace with dynamic data coming from that Dataverse action that we started in Power Automate. But I think I'd like to add a column, and I'm going to put an image in here. But I think what I want to do first is move some of these elements around to make it look a bit easier on the eyes. So I'll drop that there. Okay, and pull this one down. We'll pull this one down, and it's just a rearrangement, really. And I'm just trying to lay it out in a way that makes sense for the users. I'm going to put an image in here, drag that onto the canvas. And an image, you have to have a URL. You don't actually upload it. So I will set the URL for my image. Image URL. I'll place in an example. And like, it looks pretty squished. It doesn't look very nice. So one of the things that I'll have to do is set the properties on this so it has a reasonable size. Okay, so let's go to the image. We'll make the size medium. That'll bring it down. But now we see that the column is really not the width that I want. So we'll just put that into pixels. And now it's a little easier on the eyes to read. Horizontal alignment. That looks good. And the last one I'm looking for is the vertical alignment. There it is, center. And we'll do the same treatment over here, vertical alignment. So that's a good looking card. I'll have the purpose of why they're sending the card. I might have my corporate logo to show that it's an official bit of information. I'll have the name of the account. I'll have the current status and the value, the description of the service request, and then this fact information, the name of the product, the due date. And then finally, I have this more information button. And we can set the URL. So I'll do @URL. And now we have this option to turn our card into preview mode. And now the card is something that I can interact with. So if I were to press on a button, I could see what it would try and do. It's trying to execute the action of open a URL, and it has a parameter called @URL. Cool. You'll notice that on the screen, it has a speak element. This is for cards that can be read, if you will, by like a Cortana skills platform. I don't have a lot of experience with that, but it's something that you see inside of the samples and you're like, I don't really know what this is for or need it. So for now, this is the card, and we're going to come back to this in a moment, but let's go back into Power Automate. So we know that we're going to pull the data from the service request table. I can type that, if I can spell that right. Service. Right. But there's a lot of options here. And if you've done any work inside of Dataverse, inside of Power Automate, you know that it can be tricky to fill out all of these additional parameters. So what we want to do, if you haven't used this before, is use the XRM toolbox set of tools, in particular the Fetch XML builder, to build out a query with the right filters and the right bits of information that you need to ensure that you can copy in the parameters that you need inside of Power Automate to pull that data effectively. So in this case, the Fetch XML builder, once you have the query, you can convert it to Power Automate parameters. And so it'll give me things like the columns. So I click on columns, I come back into Power Automate, and I can select the columns from Fetch XML, paste that in here, and now the filter rows, filter. These are things that like you could probably figure out, but this is not for everyone. This is another technical barrier in Power Automate and Power Platform sometimes, that if you don't have the background skills for that, it can be a bit daunting. So expand. The expand doesn't show up, so I have to use the parameters in the new designer. So I'll paste in the expand query. And then the fetch XML, excuse me. I would not be able to write this type of stuff. All right, so let's save this. And we're going to do a quick test to make sure that we're getting data back. Now we'll run the flow, done. So if this comes back, I should see some data. In the outputs, it's still spinning. Show raw outputs. Yeah, and so I'm getting information back. Good, so we're able to move forward now. So we've used the XRM toolbox to build out our query. We've got a flow that's going to run every day. And now we need to get this data in a workable format. So to do that, I'm going to compose the information coming out of the Dataverse action. And this is my service request data. And the input is going to be the body and value coming from that Dataverse list actions row. I have to test this again because I'm going to put the outputs of the compose into a parse JSON. And I need the output to build up the schema that will be used in JSON. And I have to do this so I have data that I can use inside of this card. So that's done. So I click on the compose and I scroll down to the outputs area, and I'm going to copy the output. I have to edit again. Now I'm going to add a parse JSON action. The content is coming from the compose. It's the output. And then I have to build a schema. So that copying of the output from the compose, I can use a sample to generate that schema. So I'll paste this into the payload window, and now it's created it for me. So let's call this service requests. I'd like to rename all my actions so I stay on top of where things are. Now, one of the things I'm going to want to do is provide a link to that record inside of our service request for our users. So we had in the card, the more info, I want to build a link that takes me there. But you can tell the link is pretty complicated inside of Dynamics. So to do that, I'm going to build a variable to hold this. Initialize variable. And this is going to be var URL. The name is the same. If I can type today. And it's going to be a string. Right. So we're pulling our data from Dataverse. And when you do that list rows, you're going to get an array of information. So all of the work that we're going to do is going to happen inside of that array. So to work in the array, I'm going to use a apply to each. So this will build a looping container based on the data from Dataverse. So I add the apply to each, and I need to select the output from the previous steps. And so I'm going to use the body from parse JSON. So we build the initial array, we compose it, and then we put it in or parse it out in JSON so we have elements and attributes that we can use. Those elements and attributes that we can use will sit inside now that apply to each container, and we'll loop through doing that. So again, I want to build that URL, but that has to be at a record by record basis. So set variable will be the first action that we add. And this is going to be var URL again. Man, I can't type today. Var URL. And this is complicated. I'll try and explain what it is, but it would take me too long to explain it for the small amount of time we have. But I'm going to add an expression. Maximize that. And the expression is going to concatenate information from the model-driven apps record or entity inside of Dataverse, and it's going to build it out based on the table, the service request, and the dynamic data. But as I've added this, I totally forgot an action. So I need to do that right now before I forget. I need to add a Dataverse list rows for the model-driven apps table. I totally forgot to do this. But what this will do is give me the URL for our model-driven app, just like it says. So my apologies for forgetting that. Let's get this in here, model-driven app. And I'm going to look for my model-driven app where the name is equal to my model-driven app demo. So at this point, now my expression that we put in, which is a concatenation of that information from the model-driven apps and from our parse JSON, should give us the information we're looking for. Okay, so let's test this to make sure we're getting data back that we can use. So here's what it's built, this value. So if I wanted to do a quick test, I could just copy it and put it into the web browser. Looks like I added something I shouldn't have. There we go. Yeah, and so that's our record. So that's working. So that test is important because now it lets me know that I have the data where I need it to be inside of the loop. So let's do this, right? All of this is like building up towards getting information into the card. And one of the things that we need to do is, and this is one of the more complicated things that you'll have to do here, is getting all those card values set. And so I'm just going to create a compose. And the reality is that when you are doing this compose action, and you're formatting out those different values, this could be an iterative process that takes you some time. But I need to get the right values for my assigned to, my customer name, status, due date, and so on. And if you've worked in Dataverse data, you know that this can be complicated. So I do this just as a building block, if you will, to make sure that I've got the data rendered in a way that is going to be consumable by my users. We're very close here. This is the hardware, prepping it. Building the card, that was pretty straightforward. Plugging in the data into the card is also pretty straightforward. Composing this information to get it in a way that makes sense to your users, different. So I can have an assigned to, the customer name, the status, the date, the description. So I'm in a really good position. So now we're going to get to the point where we finally get to add our adaptive card. So I'll search for Teams, and it'll be post adaptive card. I'm going to post a card in a chat or a channel. I'm going to post it as the Flowbot. The Flowbot comes inside of Microsoft Teams. You would also have the example to post it as a Power App, a PVA, or a user. But it's going to be posted as the Flowbot, and I can do it in a channel, a group chat, if I had that information available, or a chat with the Flowbot. I'm going to use the chat. Okay, the recipient, I'm going to switch to advanced mode. Excuse me. And based on the information that we composed in the card values, I'm going to plop in the recipient. I've got the area where I have to put in my JSON, so I'm going to copy the payload from the adaptive cards designer. I paste in all that JSON, and here you can see there's quite a bit of code that gets rendered in. And here's where those placeholder values make the most sense. So I'm looking for anything with an @ symbol. So account name. And then I'm just going to replace the status value. I mean, you would get these from that compose area that you did earlier. Mine are sitting in like a cheat sheet, if you will, to the side screen. This one's the product name. Due date. And when you're doing this in like Microsoft Lists versus Dataverse, it's significantly easier. All of the data just works when you're getting it out of SharePoint. And then the URL. We did all of that work to build that URL, so we just have a variable now that we can leverage. So let me take a quick look. Make sure that I didn't miss anything for those @ symbols or for my placeholder text. I mean, it looks okay. So I'm saving that. I'm going to jump into Teams. Well, that's coming. We're going to test. And so we expect it to go to Dataverse to find any record, compose the output for those records, find out the information about our model-driven app, build that URL for us, compose our adaptive card values, and then post it into Teams. So we'll wait for that to run. It's run with success. If I go into Teams, I see that I have a new card. I have the service request reminder. I have the account name. I have the status, the description, more information. And if I click on the button, it should take me to the record, and it does. Excellent. And so what I've done was I've given my users an opportunity to intervene before the thing has become due. I've given them the convenience link to jump in and take action, but I've also given them the information about the issue at hand. So that's all good. Let's come back into Flow. And I think we did forget one of the @ placeholders. I should have seen a description, but we will fix that. We can fix that. So, okay, that's all good and well. It's and I know we're running tight on time. So what I want to do is try and get through this a bit faster. I'm putting in the payload that we had earlier. And what I want to do now is have user input. So to do that, what I'm going to do is add a choice set onto the canvas. I've added the placeholder text, and you notice I get this validation error saying I need an ID for it. And so I'm going to call the ID my user's choice. I have placeholder text, and I want to give them inline instructions. So I'm going to say set the status. And I need to give them choices, right? It's a drop-down menu box. So these choices are going to align with what's inside of the status column inside of Dataverse. So it's new, it's in progress, and it's also completed. And so if I go into preview mode, I can see now new, in progress, and completed. Cool. I need a button. This button is going to do a submit. Inside of this button, I want them to make an update. So I'll call this the update button. But the most important part in all of this is that I need to send data back to Power Automate. So in the button, in the element properties, I have a data field. And so for this, I'm going to create an attribute called user action, and then it's updated. So if I go back into preview mode, and I say update to set it to in progress, it will return this data saying the user action is that it updated it, and the choice that was made was in progress. One thing that I want to do, preview mode, text block. I meant to have a description. I'm going to add that back in, and I'm going to make this subtle. Okay, let's copy this. And we need to move faster. That's for me, not for you. And this time we're going to post a card, Teams. But this time we're going to wait for a response. I'm going to do is Flowbot. I'm going to do it in the chat with Flowbot. The message I'm going to paste in. It's added all of our text, and I just need to update that description field, which I missed earlier. Boom. The recipient, back to advanced mode. And I'm going to put in their email address. So now when this card is sent, it's going to sit there and wait. It'll wait up to 28 days for you to do something with it. It's almost like an approval. I'll get rid of this other card. But when you click that submit button or that update button and it sends the data back, you have to capture the data and then do something with it. So what we'll add is a switch statement. And the switch will, in turn, look at all of those values that could have been sent through that lookup box. But in the switch, you need to base it on data. And there's nothing that I can use here. So I'm going to do a switch on the data that's coming back. So I'm going to use an expression. And I'm going to get the output from the post adaptive card and wait for a response. And it's going to be the body, data, and user choice. And if I come back in here and preview, set status, in progress, update, user choice is what we're capturing on. So hopefully that makes sense. I'll add that. And then I'm going to do new. And inside of this case new, I'm going to do Dataverse update row. And this will be the service requests table. The row ID is coming from the parse JSON step that we took, and I'm just going to paste it in to save some time. And now I have all of the different columns that I can update. In this case, I want to do status, and this one will stay new. Great. So now we repeat this, and this will be case in progress. In progress. This can be tedious. And then I'm going to have a case for completed. And let's save some time and see if we can copy the action. Instead of new, we'll set this to in progress. Copy the action, paste it, and this one will be completed. Let's give this a save. So if all goes well, uh, it will find the record, it will build the card, it'll send it to the user will receive it, they will update the status. Uh, that in turn will be captured by Power Automate and it will update the record. So let's do a test. And let's take a quick look. We see that the status is set to new. Let's go back into flow and we're going to change that if all goes well. So the flow is starting up. I should see a notification in Teams, and I have my notification in Teams. We have our new card. We've got that great description field to give it more context. We see the status is new. I have the more information button that opens up the record, and I also have the update one. So in this case, I'm going to say that this service request is now complete. And when I click update, it's going to do two things. It's going to give me a confirmation that it's received the information or the action from me, and then it's going to return the data to Power Automate. So I click update, and my card now will turn to a message. Thanks for your response. And when I come into Power Automate, it's going to compare the output that it received, and it said, yes, it's complete, and it's updated the row. So if I go into the record, new, and I do a refresh, it's completed. And that is pretty awesome. So that means that we have kept our users where they're working inside of Teams and was able to grab that information from Dataverse, find out when something was due, give them a reminder, let them get ahead of the problem before it becomes a real problem, take action in the context of Teams. That's it for the demo. And I know we're probably getting close on time, but here's a few things that I want you to keep in mind as you're doing this. I know we went pretty fast through a lot of it, and we did have that one interruption with the hotel Wi-Fi. So if I wasn't able to fully explain things, hope that you understand that or take away that the easiest way to start with adaptive cards is to use the samples. Don't reinvent the wheel. You'll notice that I was using that @ symbol for the values that I wanted in Dataverse. Use a placeholder for dynamic data that makes sense for you. If you can use a variable for your dynamic output or a compose, do that. It's going to make life so much easier for you when you're composing Dataverse data. Dataverse data, especially when it comes to like a lookup field or a choice column, those can be hard to use. They sometimes don't represent the way you think. And speaking of which, if you are doing that Dataverse choice column data, get to know this odata.community.display.v1.formatted value function to get the value and not the numeric version of it. You're going to have to be iterative when you're doing this. When you put in that card data, do one attribute at a time. Trust me, I've been there. It's so easy to screw up that JSON. When you're doing anything in Dataverse and you're getting an array of information, learn how to use that first function. There's a really good chance that your filter queries are only going to turn one row, but because it's an array, it's going to put everything in a loop, and it can be pretty painful to do that. On GitHub, you can find one of the samples that I put together. It uses lists, and I think lists are probably an easier entry point than Dataverse. But if you scan this QR code, it'll take you to my GitHub sample that you can use as a reference point or to get started faster. If there's any questions, I'm happy to take them. Would really appreciate if you connect with me on social and we can keep the conversation going. That's it. I know I was over time, so let me stop sharing. Let me see if there's anything in the chat that I'm able to respond to.
So I can handle that so far. So first of all, thank you very much, Norm, for the impressive demo. I can tell, and you have just built that live. So despite that short outage with the hotel Wi-Fi, I think this was really cool to see how you just worked through it step by step. I really love it how you just did this, and I appreciate you have just taken the time. So we had not many questions, to be honest. It seems like it was good explained by you, so I see that as a quality by you, as well. And I do have a question which I'm just showing up here in that case is, first of all, this is the link which I just have pasted, with a QR code which you just have put in. So everyone in the chat, oh, you can also see this if you haven't scanned that. The YouTube video is, by the way, available right now. We just end that stream because there also someone has asked me for this as well. But there is a question, you have partly answered that to this, but what is the best way just to start? I love the best practices slide you just have there.
Mhm.
And how much powerful can it be to use Copilot, for example, Copilot in GitHub?
Uh, Adaptive cards, because they're authored in JSON, can have a steep learning curve. And so the Adaptive Cards Designer website that allows you to drag and drop and build up your card is a way for you to bypass having to know JSON. So I would say that if you try to author that from scratch and you're not a developer, it's going to be very difficult. If you use that website as your authoring canvas, it's not so bad. The hard part is connecting dynamic data to your placeholder data. That's the challenge in all of this. That means that you're going to have to become proficient with using the Dataverse actions that exist in Power Automate. Data stored in Dataverse does not always return the way that you think. And so I mentioned the point of being iterative. You're going to have to be iterative just to build out those sections. Okay, GitHub and Copilot, I don't know. I'm not really a developer. I've done a few developer things, but I wouldn't know. I hear nothing but good things about Copilot and GitHub, and it was probably one of the first places that we saw that land. So pretty happy about that.
I'm using Copilot Studio, for example, and adaptive cards also play a huge role, especially if you want to have your chatbot look a little bit nicer. And adaptive cards are definitely the way to go. And I'm also not really a developer anymore, but if you use GitHub Copilot and just create, based on your what you want to have, it's really great what it's just creating for you. But again, it just only creates a shell. It doesn't create, the connection with the dynamic variables. And I think once you just have managed to do this, then you're a master in that again.
Yes.
Well, awesome. Let me see and check if there are further questions as well. So I'm also checking in LinkedIn as well. So it doesn't seem so. So first of all, thank you very much. I know it was very early for you, but it was really great to listen to you. So I've learned a lot, and I'm pretty sure everyone else who joined us and also watched the video will also learn from you. Thank you very much for your time for us.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It doesn't look like my camera's working, so I apologize for those technical glitches that we had. But again, we're all fellow learners here. We learn from each other. We get validation by seeing what others have done in this space, and we grow and bring that value back to our own home organization. So thank you for taking time out. I really hope that you got some value out of this time, and you'll start building out your first adaptive card, whether that's in SharePoint or Dataverse. It doesn't matter, as long as you get building. And don't hesitate to reach out on social. Always happy to connect and chat with people about these things. Thank you all for your time. Take care.
Thank you very much, and have a wonderful day, everyone, and see you the next time with us again. Bye bye.